I'd like to reiterate my support for the statement that there's a lot of AI out there or a lot of modeling out there that provides value beyond generative AI. It's interesting how in the past few years, there have been these mind blowing improvements in generative AI capabilities that are headline grabbing. But down on the ground, the vast majority of automated applications where we're using data to do some kind of modeling and automate something that is rarely generative AI based.
Yeah.
Um, it allows us. There's cool things around. Okay, now I can have a natural language interface to something that I didn't have before. It's kind of the main use case. But then you also see people tack that into every product, and I don't need that in every product. I use this thing called Whoop, which is a heart rate monitor and like sleep detector that I wear on my wrist all the time. And the Whoop added in, I don't know, 6 months ago, this chat functionality where I can talk in the app and get advice like exercise advice, and you just never do. It'd be interesting to know if there are, like, kind of power users of that where you're chatting to your heart rate monitor app and getting advice on what you could be doing with exercise, like, I don't know. I mean, there's probably somebody out there, but it's not a huge value add for probably most users. It's probably a very small percentage that use it a relatively small amount of the time.
Totally. And well, and you layer onto that like we still haven't solved the hallucination problem, and you layer onto that the costs on the back end of LLM inference, and like there's a lot of hype, and there's still a lot of nonsense around Gen AI, I think. And you know, my hope is that the this massive extra amount of attention now that the whole world has on AI will help like elevate the more traditional data science ML use cases. But my worry is that it drowns it all out. And honestly, the direction I see more likely right now is the latter, that like the drowning it out. Because I talk to chief data science officers, chief analytics officers, and what they tell me in confidence in private is like all their CEO or all their board wants to hear about is Gen AI, even though that's probably only going to be 20% of what's going to create value in their business. So it's, yeah.
Another problem that it's created is because for, the kind of natural language in, natural language out experience that anyone now can access, including executives at your company, they get this magical feeling experience with that conversation, and then so they make what seems like a very obvious, safe leap that now AI can kind of just do anything automatically, where it requires, I mean, to build something like GPT-4o or Google Gemini, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars at a minimum to train something that kind of has that magical capability. And there are clever ways, maybe again, if we're talking about some kind of natural language interface, you don't necessarily need to be developing or fine tuning LLMs yourself. You can be using an open source LLM, like today at the time of recording with you and me here. Llama 3.1 was released. Their 400 billion plus parameter model is supposed to be competitive with the big foundation models like Claude 3.5 Sonnet and GPT-4o. Um, but yeah, obviously that kind of huge model is going to be extremely expensive to run on your own infrastructure. So you're probably, for most use cases, you're going to be better off calling a proprietary API anyway, because it's going to be so much cheaper. But the point that I'm kind of drifting away from here is that Gen AI, like you're saying, it's possible that all of this attention on Gen AI will mean that kind of all aspects of AI will be elevated, but it risks, like you said, kind of drowning out all the other kinds of data automation. And there's so many different kinds of approaches that could be appropriate in a particular circumstance. Bayesian statistical approaches, all the kinds of frequentist modeling that we could be doing, simple regression models. There's so many ways that very simple data modeling could be exactly what you need. Um, but yeah, you end up hiring people or pushing projects that are getting Gen AI into products when ultimately users aren't going to use them. And then there's disappointment around it. We spent all this money on getting all these Gen AI features in. No one's using them. AI isn't that great for us anyway.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree with you that especially the product integrations I think have a little bit of this like jump the shark feel. But let me in defense of Gen AI, I do think there are very significant opportunities to improve general workforce productivity across a number of different roles. And that's exciting, and I understand why that's exciting and compelling to business leaders as well. Especially in an era of higher interest rates and things like that. It's great to be able to make a bunch of internal efficiency improvements. But I guess I haven't seen yet the Gen AI use cases that drive like a step change, like an order of magnitude of value through, unlocking some kind of new innovation or radical transformation.
Yes, you were talking earlier about, we were talking about citizen data scientists, citizen developers, more like, yes, the kinds of visual tools, low code or no code tools could end up being helpful. I'm sure there's lots of scenarios where that is exactly what people need. Maybe it makes it easier for people to quickly see how a system is working. I can see lots of use cases for that kind of low code, no code kind of tool. But I think even more transformative is what you just described around the way that generative AI makes it so easy for me as somebody who doesn't know a lot about computer science or ML ops, being able to have some code and have Google Gemini in my Colab notebook be giving me advice on what I'm doing, or GitHub Copilot is probably the most popular example of this kind of tool. It's wild. Um, I did an episode recently, episode number 798 on Claude 3.5 Sonnet, so people can check out particularly the YouTube version of that. I mean, the audio only version works as well, but in the YouTube version, you can see how in that tool, like, I don't, if you're a listener to this show, you should be paying the $20 a month to be getting access to Claude, because it's unreal how you can be generating what they call artifacts alongside your conversation, including fully functioning web apps. So in terms of being able to like pair program with an expert on whatever you want to be pair programming on, there's never been a better time, and it's just going to get easier and easier. So yes, there are definitely big kinds of efficiency gains that can be made from these kinds of tools, as you said. I'm just kind of adding some color onto that, Nick. Daniel Hume, sorry to interrupt, but my last point here. Daniel Hume, whom we mentioned at the onset of this episode, that you and I were together with him on a panel at NYU a couple of months ago. He recently, on his episode with us, episode number 807, he had an interesting take on how you could potentially get that kind of 10x lift in an organization. It would require a lot of upfront investment, but he was making the case that in terms of the AI capabilities, we have them today. If you were able to engineer your data pipelines to be taking the vast majority of corporate conversations, so Slack conversations, emails, meeting notes, if everything was being well digested by large language models, their context windows are large enough, and you'd probably need several tiers of kind of going to summarization to summarization. There's lots of cleverness that you would need to do in terms of stitching these systems together. But at least hypothetically, the LLMs are there that they could be processing this huge amount of data, be identifying signals, and then advising people in the company up and down the organization on strategic decisions they could be making. Even things that might sound kind of controversial would be theoretically possible, like recommending who should get a promotion relative to other people. So there's, I think there's a huge amount of potential, but there's also there's lots of work to do. Like just having these wild LLM capabilities, which truly are wild. I don't want to understate that. It's mind blowing to me. It's crazy to me that we have these technologies today, and 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined that we would. But there's still a tremendous amount of human ingenuity and hard work required to stitch these things together and make something powerful.
Maybe it's possible I don't have a long enough foresight here, and I'm not being imaginative enough, but I'm skeptical that the idea of like we'll just ingest enough of the corporate data and the LLMs will be able to make good strategic recommendations. I'm skeptical of that idea, but we'll see. Yeah, maybe the future will prove me wrong.